Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 11, 1 Kings chapter 6. So, Eden's garden is now open for the nations. So, of course, we understand the tabernacle was constructed to be a kind of preliminary design here with respect to this, and not to say that it was always destined to become a temple, because Yahweh seemingly raises that concept when he speaks through Nathan to David, that he never commanded any of the judges or any of the leaders of Israel to build him a house of cedar or stone or any of these things. The tent was meant for its purpose and has been working just fine, at least for the period it was functional within Israel's history up until this particular moment. But nonetheless, he is willing to acquiesce and allow for this house to replace the tabernacle. He did promise that he would establish his name at a place in Israel, and all of Israel's males were to flock there, at least for the three high holy days as far as the feasts go. But this will be the place where they would all offer their burnt offerings and so forth. That doesn't necessarily mean it would have required a permanent tabernacle structure or a permanent temple structure, but nonetheless, this is what's going on here. But the whole idea with respect to how this connects the meta narrative is that as we've seen prototypically with the tabernacle and Israel being settled in Canaan, for the period of the judges, they really haven't been settled. Yeah, sure, that we have families living in portions of land inherited by previous generations of ancestors that continues to get passed down. But as far as them being firmly planted in the land under complete solidarity to Yahweh, that's not happened yet. Um, and the same with respect to God, firmly uh, placing his name over one particular place. He has not yet announced that to anyone yet as to where that will be. Now he is making this known to everyone. And again, this is supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations, as both Isaiah and Jesus would say. So on the left side of the screen, we're going to work through a couple of things here with respect to promises that were given and how these promises have been fulfilled now. It's important for us to make sure we're keeping that in perspective. Uh, as goes the order of events and what's being said here from 1 Kings 4 through 6, even though our host text is 1 Kings 6. So, um, as promised to Abraham, an innumerable people with an inheritance. So, God had told Abraham all those centuries before that his offspring would be as numerous as the stars of the sky, sand on the seashore. This phrase is used multiple times to Abraham and the other patriarchs, but outside of Genesis, it's not really used again of anybody except for Israel's enemies. The coalition forces under the king of Hatzor in the days of Joshua, and then again the Philistines when they were coming to do battle against Saul in his first test against the Philistines, when he, of course, offered the sacrifices he wasn't supposed to. But now, for the first time, we are told that Israel and Judah are numbered as the sand by the sea, and they are eating, drinking, and rejoicing. So they indeed are in the land of their inheritance that was promised to Abraham, and now his children have received that. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, I will give this land to your offspring from the brook of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River. And then we are told in 1 Kings 4 that Solomon ruled all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines and as far as the border of Egypt. So finally, those borders or boundaries have now been given over to the people of Israel. Again, God being faithful to his promise. He promised the people through Moses that he will dwell with them and be their God. He said as much in Exodus 29. And then this is exactly what we are told in the host text that we're reading here. I will dwell amongst the Israelites, and I will not abandon my people Israel. So he is speaking about this in the real time sense of this. God dwells amongst Israel in the days of Moses, but now he has come to do so with respect to a more permanent sense to that in 1 Kings 6. As promised to David, Israel will be planted and they will dwell in safety. He promised to David in 2 Kings 7, I will give you rest from all of your enemies. Notice what is said here of Solomon in 1 Kings 4. Throughout Solomon's reign, Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan to Beersheba, and each person under his own vine and under his own fig tree. So that kind of gives us this Garden of Eden-esque a picture here for what Israel is experiencing as goes the blessings of Yahweh's faithfulness to them. So now I kind of want to juxtapose what's going on here with the tabernacle of Moses and the temple of Solomon, that there are several similarities between them, but there are some key differences here. I don't want to nerd out too much on these details. In the darker blue blocks is the thing I really want you to pay attention for the sake of this little vignette that I'm giving you. So it was designed by Moses in a sense that he received the blueprints. He, I don't think, designed anything. but the Lord showed him the pattern, and then he brought it down. And then the Lord filled with his spirit these key figures of Bezalel and Aholiab. But notice that they were given wisdom. As they were spirit filled, they were given wisdom and understanding to be able to craft everything that was made out of cloth, special metals, jewels, you name it, smelting, whatever the case might have been. They were given the wisdom and understanding they did not have, or adding to what they did already know and had attained to be able to accomplish this very thing. But there is a design pattern that's added to or further elaborated from the schematic of the tabernacle to the grandeur of the temple, started with David, but added to by Solomon. But it's built by Hiram Abi, who also, as it is said of him, is wisdom filled to be able to do all of these things. Now, I just want to bridge down here. We can kind of skip over some of these details in these lighter blue blocks. I might have a minute here to get some of these that I think are very important. But I want to first emphasize the fact that Hiram Abi is actually a Hebrew Gentile hybrid from the tribe of Dan. His mother is from the tribe of Dan, while his father is a Phoenician. So that picture there is the idea of both Israelite and Gentile coming together to build the house of the Lord, which is really a great picture for what is going to happen in the New Testament when the final eschatological temple comes in the person, presence, and figure of Jesus, and ultimately his body, i.e., the church, the blending together of Jew and Gentile into one. But this Hebrew Gentile hybrid in Haram Abi is building a mountain that is going to bridge heaven and earth together. Now, the tabernacle has been doing this already to a degree, but now it's becoming, again, a more permanent fixture that's actually on a mountain. Whereas in the other places the tabernacle has been set up at, it's more or less on a flat, plain-like area. So we think about this in comparison to the tabernacle itself. It's a tent, and a tent really is meant for a wandering people that don't have a permanent residency. This is part of Abram's struggle throughout the book of Genesis, especially in Genesis 15, when he's asking the Lord, how will I really know that I will inherit any of this? Because he continues to live in tents until the day of his death. And the same will be said for his children immediately after him, until eventually Israel is settled in the land to build these permanent dwellings or seize the ones that they did not have to build and take over the cities of which they had driven out the previous occupants. So back to temple under Solomon, this indeed required wisdom, but we think of this in a slightly different way than we might think of wisdom in our own time with respect to what we might constitute as knowledge that becomes something that's experienced, that now we learn from lessons, both good and bad, to pull from that body of wisdom to continue to help guide us, right? But this wisdom was an understanding. That's what in Scripture wisdom is. It's understanding and insight. Understanding, construct, and maintain relations with Yahweh, because ultimately that's what the temple is for. It's for the appointed seasons, the festivals, all those things. And the reason why it's required for Israel to come, as far as all of her males go, on these 3 high holy days, because those particular feasts were meant to draw upon the experience of that generation of Israelites that left Egypt behind, wandered in the wilderness under Yahweh's provision and faithfulness to come into the land under Joshua and conquer it, and then settle into that inheritance so that no one would forget Yahweh and his goodness toward them. And the same can be said with respect to the tabernacle, because it was wandering around with them in the wilderness and while they were still working on being settled in the land, so that they had this in the foreground rather than waiting till they finally got to this place where they were settled centuries later and then start this practice of trying to observe these things as goes worshiping Yahweh in this proper concept. One quick thing that I want to point out here is some of the differences as far as the opulence here and the grandeur of this holy cosmic mountain here. As far as we have, instead of simple goat hair coverings, we've got dressed stones with multi-chambered rooms in a multi-tiered building. It's beautiful on both the outside and the inside, where it's really on the inside with respect to the tabernacle. Some of the curtain structures have been abandoned, and instead we've got beautiful doors made of cypress and olive wood that have cherubim and garden scenery built or engraved all into it, plus these massive cherubim in the Holy of Holies that overshadow the Ark of the Covenant, rather than one golden lampstand that kind of mimics the tree of life in the garden in the tabernacle. We've got 10 of those lampstands, probably 5 on each side in procession, standing parallel to each other as if it's a row of these, almost lining the banks of a river. Kind of makes us think about Ezekiel chapter 47, and of course, Zechariah 14. Plus, we have the mimic structure here of the table of showbread and the incense altar, but then we have the bronze altar for burnt offerings, but probably expanded on in size because the one from the tabernacle is not recycled for this. Instead of just a bronze wash basin or what is called a laver for the tabernacle, we have this big bronze sea sitting upon the tops of 12 bulls in teams of three, all facing the four cardinal directions, plus these bronze water carts that are basically stacked kind of end to end, following almost a train-like scenario, going in all directions from that sea as if they are going down the mountain, bringing the four rivers of Eden down the mountain from the garden to bring the blessings of Eden to the nations. And then, of course, Solomon builds his palace inside the temple complex. It's a part of it. It's directly to the right, so that Yahweh, who sits enthroned above the cherubim, bridging heaven and earth together, has his adopted son, i.e., the descendant of David, ruling as his physical representative on earth. Again, sharing this authority as he did with Adam, now with the new Adam, i.e., the son of David, who bears all rights and responsibility for that covenant, its blessings, and of course, that meant to be brought to the nations. So hopefully that was helpful, and we'll definitely unpack this more once we get into it on Wednesday. So thanks for listening. Tune in for the next one.